Rabbit culture here from Narcissist Ninjas. Racism. A difficult topic to talk about for a lot of people. I definitely believe that there's correlation between narcissism and racism. And I wonder if 99.9% of the world's problems could be solved with eradicating both of these evil stains on society. So I'm not an American. I came here in 1999. Oh, way back in the day. I married an American, a guy from the Navy. I met him in Canada, where I'm from, and proceeded to come down here to get married. I'm not sure I got swept off my feet. It was more like swept up into boredom, and I had nothing better to do, right? Not necessarily a good recommendation for a marriage. However, I have not made the most sound decisions in my life looking back over the years. However, I look at America as it is. And this is the first year, even after being here so many years, that I can honestly say that I wish I wasn't here. With the, with the way the pandemic was handled, the racial unrest or the civil unrest, and just the general abuse that's going on in society here is not a welcoming feeling at the moment. I remember when I first, we moved to Virginia, and there was a knock on our door. We lived in like a dormitory kind of thing while we were getting ready for our marriage and getting my immigration all taken care of and finding an apartment and stuff like that. And a young black man was there to talk to one of the residents. So we sat in the lounge area, and while he was waiting for his friend, and he was asking about Canada, and I was asking about the Navy and his job. And we just had, a normal, friendly conversation. And when he left, my now ex-husband turned and said, "Don't ever talk to black men like that. Don't ever be friendly to black men." And I was like, wah, 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 wah. all the pieces, like I just, I had no clue. I had no clue about, racism back then, I guess. It's only like the past maybe since I moved to America that I've analyzed it, because growing up in the place I grew up in Canada, I wasn't introduced to different cultures. And that's not to say there's no racism, because sometimes that is a sign of racism when there is no other cultural evidence, right? So I learned a lot about culture since I've been here, and have always tried to not be like the kind of person that my ex-husband is, and many of his friends were, looking back. And whoa. So basically, I've educated myself on the history of America. Definitely no expert, but what I am so amazed is that so many people in America don't even know their own history. And not only don't know it, but if they are given some snippets of information and they don't like them, they'll recreate it for themselves. They'll actually recreate their own evidence that doesn't exist. And we've seen this the past few years, I think more than ever before. It's always been in the cultures, and it's in every country to some extent, but this America seems to go in the extreme of not wanting to see reality, and not wanting to address issues that have caused problems, and they just keep recreating them, and nothing ever gets solved. It's like a loop. It's like a total loop circle. Keep going around and around and around, and nothing seems to get better. What you have to do is jump off that circle, get out of it, and start anew. But many people are not willing around here. They're just not willing to do that. They were raised in a certain way, and it's generational dysfunction, generational narcissism, generational racism. And you best and believe the two are highly, highly connected. There are so many cases that people do not even know about, that are not, wildly publicized. It's usually the same figures in history. When we learn about racial injustice and so on, we hear about Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, and the so-called famous figures that are brought out as emblems of freedom and change, but we don't get to witness some of the many, many cases. I'd be here for hours, I think, if I was to try to show some of the cases that I've been reading about over the summer. And it's so sad that people do not want to recognize the reality of what people went through, specifically Black people. And now we are seeing, it's not just Black people, right? It's also Asian people. It's anyone that's different, Muslim. I have experienced, I'm a white, middle-aged, somewhat middle class, probably lower middle class. I'm woman. And I experienced a situation just the other day. I have little tiny wee Canadian flags on the back of my car when I was going down the road. And I saw this guy tailgating me, and I hate that. That really irritates me. So I was happy that I'd come up onto a stoplight. I was hoping he would just veer off or something, but he slid up by me, and I saw him trying to get my attention, and I thought, well, maybe he's in distress and he needs some help, thinking like a Canadian. Ugh. So anyway, I rolled down on my window, and I heard every slur that I could possibly think of, the B word, I heard things I hadn't heard in many years. So I just let him go on and on. The light was about to change, and I just said one thing. I said, do you feel good about harassing a stranger out of the blue just because you saw flags? How do you know that, I didn't say this, but I thought, how does he even know that I could have just had the Canadian flags on there for whatever reason, but it was go back to where you came from. No one wants you here, all these things. And it was just a lesson. And I just said to him, I hope you have a nice day harassing strangers and it makes you feel like a man. So then I blasted my radio and I rolled up my window. And I did kind of, it was a good insight into what people experience probably on a daily basis. That for me doesn't happen a lot. It's happened before, but I'm sure people experience that on a regular basis and worse, as we have seen with the recent situations with the Asian people that were murdered, primarily Asian, and so many Black people over the summer, which has been going on for years. Let's face it, it's nothing new. It's just that it seems to have been more pronounced since the crisis, the world crisis, not an American crisis. This is a damn world crisis. And propaganda tries to feed us that this is just an American problem. And it's all about American politics. Bullshit. This is a worldwide issue that many countries have resolved peacefully, so much better than this country. Candace Owens, an example of a Black person that doesn't believe that racism exists. Whew, this one. Very difficult to have to listen to her, but I did listen to a number of her speeches. And of course, we have to respect anyone that has their own opinion, has their own agendas. That's, freedom, right? However, I don't like abuse. And I believe that she, like many, she's just one of very many in our society that spews abuse onto the public. Now, in her case, I looked into her history, and it's very interesting. She was abused by a white people in her teenage years, right? And it was very traumatic for her. Now, she doesn't attribute what happened to racism, even though it was very clearly racism. But she never acknowledged that. She did. For some reason, she just doesn't want to admit it. She then went on to develop anorexia. And anorexia is a serious physical and mental condition. She never got help for it. And I know a lot about anorexia because my best friend died from comorbidities that were linked to her anorexia, right? So I dove into that to try to understand what happened because it was very traumatic for me. And I look at Miss Owens, and I see that a lot of her spewing, and it is hatred. She denies that she's hateful, but she is spewing hatred to not only herself, but her own race, women in general. But she doesn't, she would never acknowledge that. And I see that as part of her mental health and as part of her condition that she never got treatment for. You don't mess with anorexia. And I've analyzed her situation a lot because it's very disturbing to hear someone who's in a position, she's in a fairly high position of power that can influence other young people, especially. And for vulnerable people who can't see her for basically who she is and her condition and so on, they're going to listen and follow her lead and give her a lot of praise and give her a lot their money and give her their support, and it to me, it's kind of sad, really. But again, she's one of many people. And then given that her situation is based on mental illness, then you wonder how many of these people that are, especially in politics, I mean, they are everywhere, but these people that link into powerful positions and different areas where they can feed off public and get what they can from them are often suffering from mental illnesses that were never treated. And I'm not saying that Candace is narcissistic, because I have no way of really knowing that, and I'm not sure if that's. I think her situation personally is more trauma based, and I'm not sure. It's possible that she is a narcissist, but because I don't know other things about her personal life, I wouldn't give that. I guess I wouldn't label her that. But it's what I feel, though, is that she's a product of narcissism, and it's her survival tactic of having to deal with it in her own personal life. Just because we as white people want to support other races does not mean that we think of them as victims. I rarely see a person of another race that I think, oh, look, they're victims. Let me help them. No, that is a narcissistic view in my point of view. When I look at other races, I see culture, I see beauty, I see strength, I see creativity. I see so many things. And to use this argument that, oh, if you admit there's racism, then you're supporting victimhood. No, that's bullshit. You are supporting people as human beings and acknowledging the history that has created conflict and various issues. Then you see court cases and the infiltration of systemic situations, especially in the courtroom. Oftentimes, narcissistic abusers get away with a lot more than victims. Unless the crime is blatantly murder, blatantly something so raunchous that there's so much evidence that no one can, and oftentimes it takes years and years and years to combat a narcissist in the court systems. That's why I particularly did not file a lawsuit in my personal case that I was involved in. I wanted to so badly, and I was told by a number of lawyers that I could have won. However, just think of the money involved, the time it would have taken 2 to 3 years, and what kind of damage could be done in that time. So narcissists get away with a lot in the court systems because they're highly manipulative. In this situation, too, we see the imbalance and the disparities of sentencing. And you can see it over and over and over where Black people specifically get longer sentences and more heavy sentences. And look at this lady here. White privilege on fire, right? And then, you look at what happened in the 80s with a lot of poorer Black men being put in prison on very minute drug charges. That was also kind of a systemic situation that just creates an imbalance of power. Poor Sharon, right? And cancel culture. And that's the thing. You see more white people concerned about this than anyone else. It's true. And it's not about canceling anyone. It's about, this is a term that white people have created to secure their positions and to make people feel guilty. Basically, there's finally some accountability happening and some calling out of behaviors and patterns of belief, and people don't like it. Sharon Osborne is an interesting case because she's an abuse survivor. So here we see the connection between narcissism and racist views, right? And how could you not stay with Ozzy Osbourne, right? When I personally, if I was getting a shower, I'd love to hear him playing the guitar in the background, but that's just me. However, I wouldn't stay with him after he beat the crap out of me. And he eats bats, so he's the first one that had corona, I'm sure. Just joking. But we see her feeling like a sacrificial lamb. Now, what I have come to understand is that if you stay with a narcissist for this long, she's been with him years and years, right? You either have to become one of two ways. You have to become so submissive that you lose your whole personality. And it doesn't look like she's done that, right? So for her to survive in that dysfunction, she has to become like a narcissist herself, whether or not she is one or really feels that deep down. If you took off some of the layers, she probably doesn't feel like that. But, That's how you survive. There's no other way of surviving narcissism in a personal, interpersonal relationship unless you become totally submissive or you become like the narc and basically give as good as you get. It's called in the community narc fleas. It's like having a narc flea, like you're catching fleas off them, and they're bouncing back and forth. It's important to look at specific cases, and there's just too many. This is the one that got to me the most. Elijah McClain. I guess because I work with kids, and when I looked at the videos of him, I saw semblance of autism. Possibly, I don't know if he was ever diagnosed with that, but just I could tell there were autistic traits, and that means to me oftentimes there's a significant delay in development in some areas. And to me, he looked like such a little boy that this one was a tough one to swallow. Why wasn't anyone on that scene mature and adult enough to communicate effectively with him, to help him? What the heck? When have you ever seen an autistic white boy get shot? I mean, listen, if you can find that case study, please send it to me. I'd like to analyze it. This little boy loved cats. I think he went to a rescue like every week to see cats. Now, I'm not saying that he was perfect. I don't know. Nobody knows, unless you knew that person. But by all accounts, everyone that talked about him talked of his gentleness, his peacefulness. He liked to play the violin. He loved classical music. Are you kidding me? And you could not differentiate the person from the blackness? Is that what it was? There's no other explanation. And if you're fool enough to say there is, more power to you. Stay on your island. Don't come over here. So I shed tears over Elijah's case. Probably some over this man's case too. But, an adult is very, very painful. But a child times 10. So in this case, I gave up a lot of friends for this guy. I look at it now and realize that they were really not people that I want to know. This case of George Floyd seemed to bring out the truth in everyone. And it was a solidifying factor in identifying, for me personally, who I wanted in my life and who I didn't. If you don't see the abuse of power in this situation, move on, get out of my face. I lost something like, I think it was 30 Facebook friends because of my posts about him during that time, which I could care less. But in my personal life, I also stopped communication with a few true blue, deep friendships that I thought were my friends. But when you look at people's values and systems of belief, and you see them come out in times of hardship and times of unrest, then that tells you who the person really is. It really does. This is a picture of Stack 5 from Instagram. He was a friend of George Floyd, and that's George Floyd's daughter up there. She's a little angel, right? And guaranteed, this man will never be forgotten. And no, he wasn't an angel by no means. And I've wanted to read the history as criminal history, like it was apparently rough. But, I haven't read the details myself, so I'm not going to speak on that. But when it comes down to it, in this case, he was nonviolent. He was non-combative. He was distressed, and he might have been on something. Who cares? He was not aggressive. And even if they took him down to the point of putting him flat on the ground, he did not appear to be resisting. And why did he have to keep him down there? And I remember hearing a girl in the background just screaming and crying because she knew she could do nothing. Because if she moved forward to push that cop off the guy and try to save his life, she would have got killed, right? I know if I was there, my instinct would be to go pick up a stick or whatever, or just my bare arms and go push him off the man. That would have been my instinct, because I know how I am, and I know in the crisis, I always am the savior, right? But I probably, I know I would have been killed. So there were onlookers that were powerless, and I can imagine they are suffering their own trauma today. You can't tell me that was not racially motivated. You cannot tell me. And it brought out the ugliness in people, and it brought out the love in people too. So I think it's not enough just to think that you're not racist. I think you have to voice it out. I think as white people, as people who are not of color or of a different race, we have to acknowledge the plight of others. It's the empathetic thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And if you can't do that, hate to say it, but you're probably on the narcissistic scale. You're probably there, whether it's a victim of a narcissist that you can't get a hold of your own thoughts and you can't express your own thoughts or feelings, or you're on the scale yourself. Why in God's earth would you find the phrase Black Lives Matter offensive? I can tell you why. You're somehow tied to narcissism. You either are on the scale yourself, or you're so linked to a narcissist in your life that you cannot think for yourself. it has come down to you are either with us or you're against us. And that's sad as a culture. And it doesn't mean we have to fight, but it must mean something. And it might mean that we have to stay away from each other.